Have you ever wondered how professionals become internal auditors? Stay tuned because we have the stories of two very accomplished chief audit executives with us. Welcome. Today we're going to hear the stories of two chief audit executives whose journey in internal audit is quite impressive. We have with us Rob Clark and Phil Hurd. Welcome, Rob. Really interested in hearing how you got started in internal audit.
Well, thanks, Hernan. It's delightful to be here. When I first got into internal auditing, it's because I wanted to find a profession where everyone liked me. And
sorry.
And I tried first as a telemarketer trying to sell extended warranties on cars and really didn't receive that favorable a response. And actually, I got into internal auditing kind of by mistake. I really thought that it was just going to be a starting point where I could then figure out what I really wanted to do when I grew up. And having an opportunity to see the entirety of the organization, I thought was just going to give me sort of a platform to be able to then launch my career. But here I am 3+ decades later, and I have found a passion in what I do.
How did you hear about that first job?
From a job posting that said, if you have this type of background in accounting and business, you might want to consider being an internal auditor. And my experience with folks before that was like, I don't want to be an auditor. Everyone hates the auditors. But I thought, well, maybe this is going to be a good place for me to kind of figure out what it is that I want to do after having some experience in the organization. The very first audit that they ever put me on, and again, I'm dating myself, is doing petty cash counts. Back in the days when you actually had manila envelopes with $50 in there that they would give to a unit within the organization, and then you'd have to put the receipts in and get it reimbursed. Well, in the process of doing that, I found and uncovered $25,000 worth of fraudulent activity that actually implicated two very senior level people within that organization. I then had to submit all of my working papers into the legal proceedings and actually became an expert witness in a court case. And I saw two people's lives and careers ruined. And as my friends were thinking like, wow, that must be really cool, like being in court and feeling like you're an episode of Law and Order. And actually it made me sick to my stomach because I thought, this should never have happened. What are the internal controls that should have been in place in order to prevent this? I want to be a part of helping to solve those types of issues so that I don't have to see other people's lives ruined in that same way. That's what got me into it, and that's what's kept me into it for 30 years.
Very interesting there, Rob, because we're looking in terms of what some of the very interesting / exciting / in terms of, heart-wrenching in many cases as well, because you see lives ruined as well. But I like what you said at the end there, where you said in terms of preventing things like this from happening again. And I believe that's a very important aspect of internal auditing as we see it today and into the future. Let's turn our attention to Phil Hurd. Phil, how did you get started in internal auditing?
Well, it's an interesting story. I was in the military for the first 10 years of my adult life, joined when I was 18. My last assignment was on the DMZ in Korea, and I had to scale an antenna tower at night. And on the way back down, I fell and injured myself. And I had to get out of the military a few months later. And so I found myself after 10 years with experience with a company that let you blow stuff up, that, all of a sudden I had to put on a suit and go into this business world. And so I looked for jobs that would match the skill set I had. And, so of course I crossed the rifle and blow things up off. And then I looked and there was a organization, the Georgia Institute of Technology, that was hiring for an IT auditor. And I read it. And with the exception of understanding the audit aspect, almost everything else that they were asking for, I had done. And I thought, well, that'll be a good place to start. After a couple of years, maybe I can move on. And so I went in for the interview, and amazingly, it was this man right here to my right who interviewed me. And Rob sat down and he asked me all sorts of questions. And, of course, I went through the interview process, and I got to meet a few other people. And I remember thinking, there is no way on God's green earth I'm going to take this job, because the air conditioner was broke in Atlanta, Georgia in July of that year. And he interviewed me in this suit, and I felt like I was a prisoner of war being interrogated, because it was like 100 degrees in there. And I finally, at the end of the interview, had to ask, I said, is it always going to be this warm here? But after that, Rob did see that I was to be the successful candidate. And so that's how I got my start in the career. So I guess if you look at the overall of the story, you could say I fell into it.
One thing about it in terms of your skill set. So your background was more technical. So you started in IT auditing. Is that correct?
Oh, yes. When I joined the military, I was electronics warfare, strategic systems. And so basically, I guess the civilian translation of that would be electronics technician. And I loved computers. I loved anything to do with the circuit world, so to speak. And so while I was in the service, they had some wonderful programs to help you take advantage of college education. And it was difficult. I mean, that's a story in itself, but I pursued my education while I was in the service, and I got a master's degree in management information systems. And so when I came into the civilian world, that was the skill set that I was most focused on.
Okay, great. Very good. So over the years, you have been able to augment your IT background and your technical background with more of the business and operations. Is that the case?
So I will tell you, it's another funny story. I'm going to ask Rob to weigh in here in a minute.
That could be dangerous.
When I came out of the military, I had this just in-depth IT skill set. I mean, I could sit down, I could administer. Back in those days, it was Windows NT Server. Dating myself there for the IT people watching. But what I really didn't have was a communication skill satisfactory for a big business or a large organization environment. And what I mean by that is when you're in the military, they have a communication style called bottom line up front. And there's not a whole lot of explanation. There's almost like speaking in bullet points. This is what I need. This is the situation. Well, that style didn't go over real well, and certainly the vernacular that the military uses to communicate on their day-to-day basis wasn't quite satisfactory. And so there was a point at which Rob came into my office, and he, in a very nice way, was trying to tell me, you suck at communication. That was the nicest way. And I said, what do you mean I suck? And he goes, well, Phil, you're kind of asinine when you speak. And I remember thinking, holy cow, this is what my boss thinks of me. But it was probably the best blessing in my life, because it made me realize that I had to obtain a skill set that I did not have. And that led to so many other beautiful and wonderful advances in my entire life. And I want Rob to tell the story, because I've never really asked him too much, but I've always wondered, what was he thinking on the other side of that when he said that?
Well,
let's do that. Let's do that. So, Rob, what were you thinking? And from my perspective, it appears as though that was a pivotal moment for Phil as well, in terms of being able to expand his skill set from that technical expertise that he had, and develop his soft skills, communication skills, which we have all now agreed are so important for success in this field. So what was going through your mind, and what was your intent when you brought this to Phil's attention?
Well, I want to go back to, let's start with the interview process and what I saw in him. And what I saw was an absolute gem. Might have been a little hidden at the time, but I saw a hidden gem. I saw a skill set that is exactly what I needed. As a leader, as a chief audit executive, my responsibility is to build a team with the collective skills, knowledge, and competencies in order to accomplish our objectives. And I have always, over the years, tried to find people who are smarter than me in different areas and bring them on so that collectively as a team, we can accomplish our objectives. I saw that Phil had a level of expertise that I knew would be extremely valuable. And even though he had zero audit experience, I thought, I can teach that. I do teach on auditing things. I can tell him, I can teach him those protocols. But part of what we also needed to work on was how to communicate that. And no one was going to question his technical skills. But what I wanted to do is actually help him to be able to see himself as I saw him. A leader's job is to develop other leaders. And that was my goal. I saw that gem in him. I knew the leader that he would eventually become if he applied himself. And he's standing right here in front of you as a world-class, absolutely world-class auditor that I look up to and admire and respect. But it takes that focus of pulling him aside, and there were oftentimes meetings that I would say to him, okay, I'm going to have you sit directly next to me so that I can kick you under the table at strategic points. And that is your signal to just zip it and let me take care of that message, and then let me model that for you so that together we can make sure that we're accomplishing our objectives. But I am so incredibly proud of the work that Phil has put in, because he is, like any good auditor, is always on that path for professional development and expanding your skill sets, and he is top of the list.
This is great. I really like that that story, number one, and your vision. And I think that's a very important thing for our viewers to also keep in mind, that we're not only focused on what's happening here and now, but also we need to always keep our sights into the future and how we can evolve in terms of what we do, who we do it with, and how we can help bring others along the way with us. So that's wonderful. Rob, can you tell us a little bit more in terms of contributions to the profession and how your role has evolved from that encounter as individuals, your friendship over the years, and then, of course, your growth as professionals. But then as you expand beyond your individual organizations and look at the profession, can you tell us a little bit more about what you do in the profession and how that is important to give back as a sign and as a goal for our unique and personal development?
I'm so glad you brought that up, because the height of satisfaction, I believe, is when we do give back and when we do serve others and have that servant leadership mindset in how we execute our responsibilities. And so I've always tried to look for ways in which I could get myself involved. How can I give back? What are the organizations that I can become involved in and actually give back? And one of them is with the Institute of Internal Auditors, and I actually ended up going through the leadership and becoming president of our Atlanta chapter with over 1,600 members, and ended up becoming a part of the board and then president of the Association of College and University Auditors, which is the profession that deals with audit and compliance officers within higher education. And I saw that and teaching classes, looking at ways that I could try to give back, and this through ACI Learning is one of the ways in which we have an opportunity to give back as well. And I've tried to model that and for the people within my teams, and I'll let Phil pick up on exactly what his contributions have been.
Yes, thank you very much, Rob. Appreciate it. Yes, same question to you, Phil. How has that manifested itself in your life and your career?
Well, so a little bit different path. I mean, Rob and I have held some of the same positions. I did, in fact, seek and become president of the Association of College and University Auditors. But one of the things that is I think, a little bit different, my journey, if I could pick up after Rob called me asinine.
Which I said in the most affectionate of terms, by the way.
Yeah, he meant that in the best possible way.
I did, really.
But, one of the things that I had to then begin to do is say, I had to do kind of a self-audit. And what I mean by that is I had to really take a critical look at skill sets that I had versus what I needed to become professional. And, I took a look at Rob, and one of the skills that he has, and it's just overwhelmingly developed, is his ability to go into a conversation and have a positive outcome. And so I realized that I was lacking. And so I began to explore a whole suite of tools that would allow me to accelerate my learning. And I had some experiences that had driven me quite a number of or let me phrase that. I had a suite of experiences that had driven me to be able to understand how to drive. But you have to, in addition to that passion for doing something, you have to know specifically what it is you want to do. Well, I wanted to enhance my skill sets. And so I used a suite of tools to enhance my learning techniques, to be able to speed read, to do a whole lot of things. And I started with some courses that everybody's heard of, like How to Win Friends and Influence People. on down to learning very specific mannerisms that would telegraph information when I was in meetings. And what I found is it began to move me forward. And, you know, as a chief audit executive, one of the things that I found was nobody really cared how much I could audit. They could look at my resume and see that I had accomplished. What they wanted to know was, how well are you going to fit into my team? You know, are you one of those people that's going to come in and create the stereotype of auditing? Or are you one of those people who's going to come in and break it to make us move forward? And it has been an incredible journey. And so whenever I can, I try to give back by personally mentoring people that I see that have, as Rob put it, that rough diamond exterior. But I also try to instill within my folks, my teams that I deal with, that when you've finished that formal education, that 4-year college, that master's degree, whatever it is, that's the starting point of your skills, not the end point. You better expect every year to upgrade. What are you going to do to make yourself better, to make the community that you serve better, to make the institution that you serve better? I'm always asking that, and I'm asking that of myself every single day.
Very impactful story there. And also, I really appreciate what you said in terms of the evolution of your skill set from the technical to the soft skills, and how we need to think ourselves as not getting to an end point, but rather being part of a journey of learning and how we interact with others and how we can help lift others along the way. So thank you very much for your stories and for being so kind enough to share them with us. And to our viewers, we have a lot more content to share with you, so please subscribe to our channel. There's a lot there for you.